Oh yeah guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you are all doing good. Have you ever wondered where racism really came from? Not just the symptoms, not just the attitudes or slurs, but the actual origin, how, when, and why the idea of race and racism was created. Today guys, we are here going to explore a powerful truth, one that has been echoed by scholars, echoed by historians, and now even Chatgpt has confirmed this. So guys, let's get into this video. I'll be coming back with more commentaries. In case of any thoughts, kindly feel free to let me know in the comment section. Let's get into this.
The history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, you know, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people, right? So ultimately the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. Fast forward to the Civil War era. And you have, I'm from the South, right? My people, the elite in my part of the country, right, actually announced that the reason they wanted to break away from the Union and possibly go to war with their brothers and sisters to the North was in order to maintain slavery and white supremacy. They said that at the time. We lie about it now. And we say it had nothing to do with that. But of course, at the time, they didn't have any shame about it, so they just said it openly. Right? The vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, said that the cornerstone of the new government was the great truth that the Negro was not the equal of the white man. So that's the reason the Confederacy was formed and existed. But here's the trick. If I'm rich and I want to go to war to protect my ownership in other human beings, my property, but you're poor and you don't own any enslaved people, why the hell would you go fight to protect my stuff? Because I'm a rich person. I'm not going to fight. Rich people don't go to war, right? Rich people get poor people to go to war for them, whether it's in 1860 or whether it's during the 1960s or whether it's today, right? Rich folks get doctors to write notes for them that say that they have heel spurs and that's why they can't go to Vietnam. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you can Google that shit because he's sitting in the White House right now, right? Oh, I can't go fight. I have heel spurs. Send some poor kids to do that for me, please, right? So that's been a long-standing tradition. So the rich have to figure out a way to convince the poor to go fight for them. But that's a hard thing. That's like a hard sell, right? Like, how the hell, why would you do that? Why would you go fight to protect my property rights when you don't own anything? The only way you would do it is if that rich person comes to you and says, hey, listen, you gotta go fight because we gotta maintain our way of life, because if these people get free, they're gonna take your jobs. No, fool, they already got your job. That's how it works, right? Because if I'm white and I gotta charge you $1 a day to work on the farm, but you can get a black person to do it for nothing because you own them, guess who got the job? Free got the job, right? So in a sense, poor white folks would have been better off joining with black folks to overthrow the slave system. That would have raised the wage floor of all working people. But they got tricked by rich white men telling them that their enemies were black and brown. Fast forward to the 1930s. And you have white labor leaders. They're not even the elite, right? The labor leaders are not the elite, but they're the elite within the labor movement. And even they had fallen for it at this point. So they didn't want to integrate their unions. And they would say things like, well, we can't have black people and Mexicans and Chinese folks in our unions because if we do that, it's going to reduce the professionalism of our craft. We have to maintain the integrity of our profession. No, fool, you need more people in the damn union is what you need. And if you don't let those folks in, guess what happens when you go out on strike? Who is the boss going to use to replace you? They're going to replace you with the very same black and brown folks that you didn't want to work next to, right? And so at the end of and then you're going to blame them for taking your job rather than the white rich dude for giving it to them, right? Divide and conquer, telling not rich white folks that their enemies are black and brown. And now we fast forward to the president. We got the president of the United States becoming president on the basis of that same rhetoric, telling not rich white folks that the reason they don't have a job is because Mexicans took them.
Okay, so with that said, what is the origin between the racism between the black people and the white people on this planet?
According to the Akashic records, the origin of racism between black and white people did not begin on Earth. Its roots trace back to ancient galactic conflicts, particularly power struggles between star lineages that later played out on Earth through human bodies and skin tones. These tensions were seeded long before colonization and slavery, though those became the densest expressions. In the distant past, certain Lyran, Orion, and Anunnaki factions experienced deep polarity between those aligned with heart-centered unity and those aligned with control, hierarchy, and domination. These galactic tensions involved beings of various appearances, but over time, as souls reincarnated on Earth, many of those unresolved patterns became attached to race, land, and power. When early human civilizations were genetically influenced by different star groups, some lineages became more connected to Earth's elemental and emotional frequencies, like many black and indigenous populations, while others, particularly paler-skinned genetic groups, were engineered or adapted for environmental mastery and mental refinement. As civilizations rose and fell, these energetic differences were exploited. The turning point came when the Earth entered denser dimensions, what some call the fall of consciousness. During this period, beings forgot their soul origins. Hierarchies solidified. Skin color, once simply a reflection of climate adaptation and star ancestry, was used as a tool to justify separation. Like elites, both human and off-planet, used racial division to maintain control. Slavery, colonization, and systemic oppression were not just political acts, they were karmic flashpoints. They replayed ancient galactic wounds, those of betrayal, rebellion, exile, and the misuse of power. Black people, often holding deep ancestral memory and earth wisdom, became targets of suppression to keep the collective asleep. White people, often used as tools of empire through programming and disconnection, inherited both the illusion of superiority and the spiritual burden of forgetting. But none of this was accidental. It was a soul-level agreement by both groups to play these roles so that humanity could one day face its shadow and return to unity. So the racism we see now is the echo of ancient wounds left unresolved. But it also marks a doorway when both lineages remember who they truly are, not their roles in history, but their essence as cosmic beings. They begin the process of healing timelines, releasing karmic loops, and co-creating new Earth.
As we continue watching, guys, what are we even exploring in this video? We are talking about a striking truth. Racism has a documented origin, and it's not what many have been taught. A white professor has talked to us, and he has talked about the historical breakdown, aligning with Chatgpt's analysis, revealing how racism was socially and politically constructed for control and division. This conversation shifts the blame away from black communities and places the focus where it really belongs to. So guys, this video is a must watch for anyone seeking truth, justice and clarity about racial dynamics in society. Open your mind, challenge what you have been told, and join in the conversation. So let's listen to this lady, what she's talking about all this. So I'll be back.
Let's be real. A lot of white folks in this country are generational professional victims. They'll tell you they've been silenced, ignored, replaced. But when you look at history, they've had the mic, the stage, and the spotlight. And yet, somehow, they're still crying in the front row. So we see it every single time progress shows up, right? Civil rights, for instance. Suddenly, white people were the victims of reverse racism. Affirmative action, they screamed about being passed over, all while 90% of the top jobs went to them. Today, if you even whisper the words equity or reparations, it's like you committed a hate crime against their feelings. Y'all should see my DMs. But here's the thing. This victimhood isn't new. It's inherited, passed down. So go all the way back to Reconstruction, okay? Black folks take seats in government, build schools, open businesses, and white people, they cry that their world is ending and they burn it all down. From Tulsa to Wilmington, that's the script. If we gain, they claim that they've lost. And let's not forget that the government backed their sob stories. Housing policies wrote checks to white families while redlining black neighborhoods. GI benefits flowed to them after World War II while black vets were locked out. They got the subsidies, the handouts, the safety nets, and still somehow managed to frame themselves as the ones being cheated. Professional victims. Because it's never enough to have the system tilted in their favor. They also need the sympathy. They need to be both the oppressor and the oppressed. And that's why so much of our politics sound like white temper tantrums. Project 2025, pure victimhood politics. They're taking your America, your jobs, your schools. It's the same recycled lie. You have to keep white people scared and crying, so they don't notice who's actually cashing out at the top. Meanwhile, black, brown, and indigenous people have been carrying generational trauma, loss, and violence that we didn't ask for. We didn't choose this, and we for sure haven't gotten a bailout for it. But if you ask some folks, they're the ones under attack. All because their kids might read about slavery in a textbook. So yeah, I said it. Generational professional victims. And the reason it's so messy is because some of them don't even see it. They've worn the costume for so long they think it's their skin. And let me be clear, I am not villainizing every white person. But just like women say about men, until it's none of you, it's all of you. So the truth, if equality feels like oppression, is because you were never taught what equality actually looks like. And history shows us that the loudest cries of victimhood have almost always come from the people holding the whip.
Yeah, you know, guys, we have come to the conclusion of this video, and let's start with this white professor. He's a historian who studied the construction of race in Western society. He explained that racism is not a natural human instinct. It's a social invention, a deliberate invention. According to historical records, race as a concept didn't even exist in ancient times the way it does today. People were identified by culture, by tribe, by language, and not by skin color. It wasn't until the 16th and 17th centuries, during the rise of European colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade, that something changed. That's when the ideology of race was developed, and with it the narrative that some races were superior and others inferior. Why? To justify slavery, to justify genocide, to justify exploitation, and most importantly, to create a system where power and wealth stayed in the hands of a few. Now, here is where Chatgpt comes in. When asked to analyze the historical roots of racism, it gave an answer that that aligns directly with what this professor and many others have been saying for years. Racism was manufactured to serve economic and political goals, not because of actual biological differences between people. In fact, science has long confirmed that there is more genetic variation within the so-called races than between them. So what does this mean, guys? It means that the idea that black people are somehow less than or responsible for societal problems is a complete fabrication used to shift blame and maintain control. Let's be clear, black people are not inherently violent. They are not inherently poor, and they are not inherently broken. What's broken is the system that has deliberately marginalized them for centuries. And the more we understand the true origin of racism, the more we can dismantle the lies it was built on. So if you've ever been told that racism just exists or it's always been this way, you deserve to know that's simply not true. And it's time to stop blaming the victims of a system they did not create. Let this be the start of a deeper conversation, a more honest conversation, and a more just future. And because until we name the real problem, we'll never find the real solution. That's it, guys. Thank you for watching. Of course, all credit belongs to the original creators of the video. Thank you so much, and thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like this video, share and subscribe. Kindly hit that notification bell. Give this video a thumbs up. Share for this video to keep getting recommended to a wider audience. Let's keep this dialogue going. Thank you. Peace be with you.